is the Amidon Planet Podcast, episode 32. I am your host, Joel Amidon. Thank you for joining me on this never-ending quest to figure out how to teach better. So thankful for everyone out there who's been listening. It seems like the podcast is gaining some momentum. Seeing folks out there with the Be the Good shirts, seeing folks out there talking about things that they heard about in the podcast. Just some great things, just some positive momentum. And what I'd like to do is put an invitation out there. If you have ideas for things that we should put on the podcast, we're going to be pretty consistent with content coming out in the near future. But if you have ideas on what we could do to figure out how to teach better, go ahead and sign up for the Amidon Planet download, which if you go to amidonplanet.com and click on the join the email list, you'll get access to periodic emails from me on things and resources and things that are happening at Amidon Planet. And you can just respond to any of those emails, and then it'll come back, and if you have ideas, technology, a question, whatever, things that we should cover on the podcast, we would like to have some input from you. So that's the easiest way to do it. Also, you can hit me on social media, all at Amidon Planet, either on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all that good stuff. But today on the podcast, it's exciting, is Shimikqua Ellis, a doctoral student here at the University of Mississippi, experienced English educator, and leader of the School of Education Summer Book Club, where we all selected, actually we group selected, the book Not Light But Fire, How to Lead Meaningful Race Conversations in the Classroom by Matthew R.K. And Shimikqua did a great job facilitating the discussion. Lots of great learnings from this book. So I thought, you know what, this is a good candidate for the podcast. And Shimikqua was willing to join me on the podcast, which is great because she is awesome. She comes with a lot of energy, lots of experience, and we had a great conversation that I want to share with you now. So let's not delay any further, but before we jump into that conversation, just a quick disclaimer, in no way will we be able to communicate the whole value of the book, and even if we did, it would be from our perspective. In other words, if you like what you hear, go get the book for yourself. Links to purchase the book can be found at amidonplanet.com/episode 32, or seek it out wherever you buy high-quality books like this one. If possible, try to support your local bookseller, like Square Books here in Oxford, Mississippi. Oh, I love Square Books. All right, without further delay, here's my conversation with Shimikqua Ellis on the book Not Light But Fire, How to Lead Meaningful Race Conversations in the Classroom by Matthew R.K. Shimikqua Ellis, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Amidon Planet Podcast. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and so glad that you're willing to come on. How are you doing today?
Awesome. Thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be here and really grateful to spend this time chatting about an amazing book with an amazing professor.
Oh, you can't do that. You can't start me like that. I've been blushing. All right. Well, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners? I mean, I've had the pleasure of seeing you in the doctoral program, but why don't you just share a little bit about yourself to the listeners before we jump into this book?
Hello, everyone. My name is Shimikqua Ellis. I currently am a doctoral student at the University of Mississippi in their PhD in English education program. And I supervise student teachers for the university, and I teach undergraduate education courses. Before coming to the university, I worked for Teach for America, Mississippi. I taught 5th grade in Oxford, Mississippi. I taught high school English in St. Louis, Missouri, my hometown, for 9 years. And I taught in Nantong, China at Nantong University. I love teaching. I love kids, and I love to learn, and I love to read. So living in my passion and sharing my joy with other educators is something that I'm lucky enough to do. And that's pretty much who I am.
You share your passion and you share your energy. I think if anyone has seen you in the halls of the School of Education at the University of Mississippi can attest to, like, you definitely have an energy about you and the excitement about doing the work that you're doing. So how did we get to reading this book, Not Light But Fire? Because I was excited for the opportunity this summer, but you kind of led the charge. You have a little insight?
So I actually stumbled across this awesome book. You see all these marks.
Yeah, they are Post-its everywhere.
Well, I told you I'm a doctoral student, so I'm in dissertation mode. So for my dissertation, I was looking at what are some of the barriers or challenges that teachers have experienced when they try to have meaningful conversations about race in the classroom? What are the successes and what are the barriers? And I stumbled across this book. I thought it was phenomenal. So I did what teachers do. We share.
Mm-hmm.
And I shared it with some of the other faculty here at the University of Mississippi. And we have a very, very awesome dean, Dr. David Rock, suggested that we do a book club. And so I put it on the list. And this actually got the most votes. I had no idea that we were getting ready to have the summer that we had.
Mm-hmm.
And it just was very timely and appropriate, profound read, and very, very relevant and helpful.
Yeah. So this book, Not Light But Fire, How to Lead Meaningful Race Conversations in the Classroom by Matthew R.K. And I think I've seen some tweets from him, over the summer where, people were like not being able to find the book. There's so many that are flying off the shelf. So I think, people saw this as filling a need when, people thought, hey, we need to start having these conversations in a classroom. And, for me, and I teach math education, you think like, some might be listening out there and saying like, well, why would you be having race conversations in a math classroom? And like, you can have lots of race conversations in a math classroom. Like there's a lot of mathematics within it. And you're talking about disproportionate representation of students in special education program. Like we've had some of these conversations where there's lots of math out there. And even one of the other podcasts that I'm a host of is with teaching math teachers. We did a whole thing on this book called High School Math Lessons to Explore, Understand, and Respond to Social Injustice. And a lot of those subjects within there are topics that are addressed in some of those math lessons are around race. And so being able to feel equipped into having those types of conversation, I think this book does a great job of setting the stage for it. So I'm so thankful that you brought it to the group and that Dean Rock was willing to let us all get a chance to read it this summer.
Absolutely.
So he organizes the book, and I don't know, as a teacher of English, and he has some in thinking about how he sets up the book and letting it, like some of the practices that he has, like how did you think about how he set up the book in the way that he introduces some of the concepts that he's bringing in to play in this book?
So I thought it was well organized. I could definitely tell that he was an English teacher. Well written, well organized. And I mean, he kind of opens it up like you would start a paper, like this is what this book is about.
Mm-hmm.
He lets you know this is not a why book, this is an how book. This is a how book. And I loved how he opened it up and made it clear because, of course, I was dissertating and I had hundreds of books. So I'm like skimming, like, what is this one about? Oh, he's actually going to get into how to do it. We already know we need to be at. And I mean, it actually hooked me at the very beginning when he was talking about his experience, what brought him into writing about these topics and really, really exploring these issues. And then he just digs right in with how, giving examples. I liked how he broke it up into 2 parts. Yeah. Very well organized, easy to read, phenomenal quotes, very direct and authentic. He challenges himself in this book, but he also challenges his students and other educators. He talks about his experiences in the classroom, experiences doing PD, and his experiences as a student being educated. He opens up that actually brought him to, okay, I'm going to write a book about this.
Yeah. I think about,
from powerful. It kind of showed the need, how we got to this point. He really opens it up well and it flows well. And I also really like how at the end of each chapter, he kind of sums it up and gives tips. So it's consistent.
Yeah. And actually giving like here are some things you could do. And like, saying like the how part, the part 1 is the ecosystem. Part 2 is a study of conversations. So the part 1 is like setting the stage for how do you create the environment to even have these sorts of conversations. And, he says things that are like, kind of like, I'm going to say obvious things, but like they are like, hey, build relationships. You can't just walk into a classroom like, hey, we're going to have this really heavy conversation. You have no idea who's in the room, right? And to build those relationships and thinking about how do you do that? And even, and thinking about like some actual practices that he executes on a weekly or monthly basis in order to build those relationships. So to create the environment, and then actually to give like 4 chapters of examples on how to, and how what he set up plays out actually within conversations. And it's pretty amazing. Pretty practical, but gets at it from a very academic way as well.
Absolutely. And I think what helps it be so practical is he gives examples at the end, but it's also, even though it's academic, it's centered around student voice.
Right.
He constantly has excerpts from students, their opinions, their writing, their responses. He talks about what his reflections were when he did it with students. So that also makes it practical and approachable for educators and people at different levels, especially when you're talking about people who are interested in social justice or how to be culturally relevant in the classroom. You've got people at different levels. This is good for introductory and intermediate, depending on where you are on the spectrum.
Right. And I thought that the whole, the reasoning behind the title of the book, where he gets at in the introduction, when he talks about Frederick Douglass's speech, where talking about it's not light but fire that is needed, right, to shed light onto it. It's like, how do we move to the next conversation? And right, because conversations have been had, and I think sometimes this is you pay lip service to certain things, like, yes, we stand for social justice, and yes, we want equality, but like, what actually are you doing about it? And like it gets me thinking, like there's another book club on how to be anti-racist, and talking about racism versus anti-racism, and or versus non-racism, right? And like just to not do anything, like to keep these status quo conversations, or like that's not we're not going to have those conversations in this classroom. Or like I treat everyone the same, right? That non-racist sort of approach. Like, well, if it's non-racist and there's systemic racism happening, you're still moving with racism, right? And to actually do something against it, to move, like he's saying, to that next conversation, we need to have the tools and equipping in order to do that. And I think he's providing that here. And I like the motivation behind the title. And I see that this book offers a way for us to move to that next level of conversation and not just sit with the status quo.
Absolutely. There's awareness, and there's allyship, and then action.
Yeah. So speaking of, let's just as 2 teacher educators, and let's think about what are some lessons that we've learned. And so jumping right into the categories and sticking to our high 5 and thinking about what are 5 learnings that we had. We can go a little tennis style. We can go bounce back and forth a little bit and see if you want to give one first, and then I'll come back with one and we'll go from there.
Well, sure. So one that I definitely recall, and it's on page 40 in the book, he just talks about how important it is for educators to actually begin with a self-assessment. They need to reflect on how their own racial experiences and perspectives influence their ability to hear and properly respond to other perspectives. If you're going to have a meaningful conversation, it starts with you. Reflect on your experiences and your expectations and perspectives. And how open are you, and how equipped are you when you get exposed to different perspectives and experiences?
Yeah, I have that underlined right at the bottom of page 40. Because I think that is one of the things that I keep coming back to, is something that I don't know if it was I don't know what the right term is, not aware, or just not sensing it, or just talking it out, right? Like my own experiences in a math classroom, like that, seeing that my experience as a white male in a primarily all white school up in Wisconsin, and thinking about even just like the math teachers that I had were white males, and and like thinking, like when I struggled, like I still saw someone that looked like me up front, like doing the mathematics, like this, even that slight little thing, maybe like being reassured, like I can do this, like I'll be fine. and like not even and acknowledging that there was privilege and there was positionality in my own like path to becoming a teacher, and not seeing that till later, right? Like not acknowledging it, pointed out, or being reflective about it, and think like not everyone in my class is having the same experience. Even like thinking about my first test, when I, if I said something, I thought my students would receive it because like that's how I did it. I just like, I have a good memory, and I remember, I'll do it. I'm supposed to do, and that was a very procedure based, kind of approach to mathematics. And that was, hey, I kind of thought everyone was like that, and it's not. And like having that reflection on your own experiences and who you are and your positionality and all that, I think this is so important. And just to like that, it's almost like a foundational piece.
Absolutely.
You want me to go next?
Yes.
All right. I thought the guidelines for conversational safe space on page 13 was interesting. Oh no. Not page 13. There we go. On page 17, actually. So he had these guidelines, these 3 guidelines, to establish a safe space to have these conversations. So we're going to the guidelines were to listen patiently, listen actively, and police your voice. And he kind of reinforces that throughout. I mean, I thought having those sorts of, like, hey, these are the guidelines. This is what makes up a safe, because, and like you said in here, sometimes we say those words, oh, this is a safe place. This is a safe space. And like, is it just safe from physical harm? Because, or like, I remember I wanted my classroom to be safe. I didn't want anybody ever to say, shut up to anybody. Like, you'd never said that in my class. Like, I wanted voices to be heard. But he goes to the next level of doing all these sorts of things, of listening patiently, actively, and policing your voice, to make sure that we're giving space for everyone to contribute. We're also, when people do contribute, that we're acknowledging that as like a gift that they're putting out into there. And I thought those were really, one, easy to remember, and I love the way that he shows them throughout those sorts of guidelines. I don't know, just curious, like when you had your classroom, when you were teaching in the secondary level, what kind of guidelines did you use, Shimikqua?
So I have several different guidelines because I normally would let my students pick things.
Yeah.
Ultimately, my number one rule was respect.
Yeah.
I would always have the kids talk about what does respect mean to them. Because I mean, as this is an awareness thing, as
Right.
you have experiences, I was brought up where you treat people the way you want to be treated.
Yeah.
But now I'm experiencing that, no, you need to treat people the way they want to be treated. Sometimes, for example, some people want you to call them doctor. And then some people are like, no, I really prefer you to call me Joe.
Yeah.
So you want to treat people the way they want to be treated. Some students think that yelling is disrespectful. Some people don't want to be touched. Some people don't want a high five. Actually taking the time to get to know your students and building those relationships is important. And making it clear, you can't assume what respect looks like and sounds like and feels like to you.
Yeah.
Respect to me is you making eye contact when I am talking to you, saying yes, ma'am, or no, thank you. Respect is not putting books on the floor.
Right.
That's my pet peeve. I can't stand for a book to be on the floor. Books are so important to me.
Oh yeah.
And I need to let the students know that we respect school property.
Yeah.
We want nice books. We want to keep them nice.
Right.
So I would have conversations and we would make down rules, and depending on each class, you would hear different things. Does this feel or sound like respect to you? How do you talk to each other?
Yeah.
Come into class. Is it okay to walk across the room when somebody is speaking?
Right.
Those type of things, and really having that conversation. I got a lot of interesting things from students.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much my protocol. We talk about respect, and it really touched on so many different things.
So like co-creating what the class needs to feel safe and thrive in your classroom.
Absolutely.
Love that. My cooperating teacher, when I was way back when, Joe Dye. He did something similar. Like he would like collect like what do we need to feel safe and thrive in this classroom, and even down to what the temperature is in the room. To like how do you feel good like with raising your hand? You want to just write things down, like things like that are listening to your students, right? And that's also you feel like a welcome part because you're co-constructing what makes sense for how we're going to respect each other, like you just said. Yeah, that's excellent. I like too that that he puts in the math of it in page 37. You knew I would like this. So
of course.
yeah, on page 37, he like lists like how much time it would actually take to do these things. Like that's 12% of his class he does to building and maintaining a healthy classroom climate. And like you think like 12% of your time to make it so a space where people feel safe and can thrive. I mean, that's a bargain right there, I think, and to using that time well. And you think like how much time you, by investing in those relationships, investing in the classroom climate, like you're making it so the environment that the rest of the time, the 88% is a quality experience where we're getting as much done as we can, and be able to have these kinds of conversations that build us towards a better understanding, better learning that's happening. And so it's a great investment in my.
Absolutely. That kind of touches on what I was going to talk about in Dr. Amadon on things that I learned. I really like, because we've all been in a classroom and it feels like you just never have enough time. And I really like how he broke down the math of, look, if you just spend this much, it will actually save you on the back end, because you won't have to address all these off-task behaviors. You won't have to repeat yourself.
Right.
Kids will be engaged. So it actually solves a problem. And things that I learned from this book and people he kind of shares are some good community builders and habits and routines that don't take a lot of time, but create big wins in the long run, and really, really start establishing the relationships and the rapport that you need for a safe space and just a healthy, productive classroom environment, student-teacher relationship.
Yeah.
I really like the ideas he gives like 3 really cool relationship building. Burn 5, 5 minutes, you get to know the kids, or who won the basketball game, things like that. And then high grade compliments. I love that. And then the third one was good news. Sharing good news. I actually have been implementing that in my undergraduate courses, and the kids love it.
Me too. Yeah.
They're prepared for good news, and I must say it really helps me get to know students and names, their lives, things that I normally would never known about them. I find out, oh, you're pregnant. You were in a wedding. You're dead. You're from so-and-so. You like to fish.
Right.
Like all these cool things, good news. It really makes a difference. And students start making connections with others, things that they have in common.
And I've seen some research on that with something about developing the relationships, not only between the teacher and the student, like that there's something there, even if the student is not even aware of it, that there's commonalities between the teacher and the student that they become aware of, can help facilitate them and begin investing in the content, because they see like, oh, there's like this, I don't know, I like to think of it as like you're building a conduit with which the teaching and the lessons can then travel through. I mean, again, the investment of that time in order to build so that you can have quality interactions within the classroom is just so valuable. But yeah, that whole thing of all of those different practices is really like tangible things you could do. And what I love about it is by sharing those things, you might not think like, oh, I'm going to do those things exactly, but you can kind of see, here's what it's not that hard, like, right, to say, hey, let's share some good news. And like, what else could we do in that area? Like, how can we give high grade compliments? What are some things? And I bet you there's so much creativity that's been spun off of this, because once teachers get ideas, they start rolling with them and start thinking of other ideas that they could do to, again, build this ecosystem, this safe conversational space. But that really actually got me into my next one, which it really, I can think kind of plays right off it, is these conversational packages that he's talking about. Like developing, like, it's almost like your conversational toolbox of things that you would do in order to think like collaborative, almost think of them like as collaborative learning structures, these things like, oh, we're going to do a think, pair, share, which as soon as you say those 3 words, it means something. If you've established that as a routine in your classroom, it's like, oh, the students know how to execute. It's like a play on the basketball court, right? You're like, oh, you know, we're going to run play 1. We're going to run think, pair, share. And it's like everyone knows their places and what to do in order to execute it. And so having a set package of different structures that you can use, I can think of some that I would use. Like one of them was called dinner party, where you would mingle around, and then I would say a certain number. You would get in that many in a group, and then you would have a conversation about a question that we would do. And so same thing could happen. That could be part of my conversation package, right? And so I wonder, do you have anything in your conversation package? Do you have any structures that you like to use in your class?
So yes, I refer to this quite a bit, and you can do all kind of things with it.
Mm-hmm.
I call it a 3-2-1.
Mm-hmm.
So I have the students discuss 3 things that they learned.
Yeah.
And then the 2 is 2 ways that they would apply it in their practice.
Mm-hmm.
And then 1 is 1 question that they still have.
Nice.
And I get great feedback. I get great questions. You really get a chance to see what people actually processed and what they're still chewing on and what needs to marinate a little longer.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's a good gauge for me. And I kind of see, okay, so we got this, but I need to touch on this a little more. And I always learn things.
Yeah. Excellent. What's another one you had? Any other learnings for you?
So another learning is, I know that people often talk about not being a sage on a stage.
Yeah.
What does facilitating actually look like in a classroom?
Mm-hmm.
And being in teacher education, I think we're constantly trying to teach our future teachers and our pre-service teachers how to facilitate. He really, really goes into detail on what dialogic pedagogy is, why it's important, the why, what, and how.
Right.
And he just gives vivid, direct examples. On 228, I just wrote, he reiterates, I'm facilitating. And then he talks about what that looks like. Operating as the conversation's traffic cop, offering orientation before, summary after, inserting clarification when needed. So he's giving you a visual of how to facilitate.
Right.
And really making sure you're policing your voice, because it's not about you. It's about making sure that the students' voices are being heard,
right,
and respected and encouraged. That's what a good facilitator does.
Right.
And I think that was a really good point to make. Another one that I put on this page, because I just found it really powerful, as an English teacher, a part of our job is really, really teaching persuasive writing and getting kids to understand all the rhetorical techniques. Well, you can do that, but he really, really touches on a big point on why it's so important. Like, we are literally preparing people to be critical thinkers and leaders. He states, students need to learn how to articulate their opinions amid direct scrutiny. They must not wilt at the slightest pressure from a perceived authority. Also, we hope to inspire a generation of students who realize the most ideas improve through pruning. So as an English teacher, I'm thinking about the writing process.
Yeah.
And how it improves through pruning. You need to be okay with scrutiny, teaching kids how to edit, how to give feedback, how to be a critical friend.
Right.
And how to defend. I mean, this is higher level thinking. If you can't defend why you feel the way you feel, are you sure you feel that way? I mean, in writing and in critical thinking and in analysis and in argument, You need to be able to state your point clearly and support it with evidence. Defend it.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't, you need to go back and read.
Yeah, and not just something that you've been given, right? Like, you know, like, hey, here's a point, here's an argument, here's points behind it, but like, and like, here you go on a platter versus like, no, how can I make sense of this for myself and make sure that the points it makes sense and aligned with my own beliefs, my own things that I have. And what better place to do that pruning and refining than in the safe place of, like, for this, an English classroom, right? That he's talking about.
Absolutely.
I love it. Yeah, that kind of made me think about, there's another book that I read this past summer. I read a lot of books over this summer. There's one called Rough Draft Math. It's called Revising to Learn. And so I thought you'd like this. So it's taking the idea of a rough draft into the math classroom and talking about presenting unfinished thinking as a way to participate in the space, right? And that people's bringing in their thinking, like, that might be, that it's to a certain place where I'm willing to share, but we want to, as a collective, make it better. And in one of the chapters in there, it just talks about what's all the different ways that you could make the thinking better. You can make it more elegant. You could make it more reasoned. You can make it more, understandable from different levels. Like, there's all sorts of, like, a whole, 10 to 15 ways you can make a mathematical argument better. But like, thinking of that, like, better can look a bunch of different ways, right? In order to think, like, how can we do that?
Thinking. That's what we want.
Mm-hmm.
Take something, if you can defend it, that's higher level.
Yeah, and like having it, okay, so now that's good, but now it's really long. How can you make it shorter, right? So that you stay within people's attention span, right? All that sort of thing. So, like, what a great thing to think about, like, using this space as a place to engage in those critical thinking, like, because we probably need those skills, right, in these days, maybe just a little bit. But that made me think about, like, one thing that I saw was the intentionality behind the conversations. I think sometimes folks, they see something like, oh, I want to talk about that, but they're not thinking about what are the purposes behind that, what's the intentions, or what's the motivation behind those conversations. So he had two things.
I'm snapping.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
The two things I was going to point out was, like, on 116 in the book, from a page there real quick. Like, he talks about some of these, like, personal catalysts, right? So, he has this list of personal catalysts that he said are not necessarily bad, but it's like some of them, like, are they for the benefit of your students? So we have the race conversation to, I don't know, how to assuage our guilt. And if I pronounced that right. We have the conversation to be cool. We have the conversation to point out the elephant in the room. We have the conversation for the status that comes with raising an army. We have the conversation because we just like talking to them. And, like, those sorts of things, like, are these what I'm, is this the motivation behind this conversation? Should I be having this conversation if these are primarily the motivations? And then not counter that, but instead he puts out these propositions on the next page, on page 120. It says propositions that ensure purpose, right? So that make sure that we're doing these things or we're talking about these things for a purpose that's, for lack of a better term, noble, I think. That's, like, for the purpose of benefiting the students. And so if the race conversation about a hard problem provides space and time for students to locate their sphere of influence and to explore personal pathways to solutions, right? We're not just sitting here just to bring up trauma, right? We're trying to do something about it. Proposition 2, design race conversations that encourage students to follow new lines of inquiry, right? Well, that's something interesting. Why don't we go take a look at that? How can we investigate that more? Or proposition 3, students should be encouraged to publish whenever they feel ready. This opportunity must be built into the culture of the classroom. Like, all right, now that we've figured out something, how do we put something out into the world? Those I thought were
action piece.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder what's how you can tap into this, sort of these desires of wanting to activate. And so how do you help them say this is not just contained in this classroom, right? This is about moving out into the world. Makes what's happening in the classroom much more relevant to their lives, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because I think sometimes, one was, these intentionality behind conversation. So one, this was about the purpose, but then two, he talked about these different types of conversations, like the designed one versus the pop-up conversation, or, about creating the space. There's very much intentionality there. And then, but the one that I really liked was the idea of ending well. And so in one of the chapters,
Yes, he's big on summary, summing it up, making sure everybody, yes.
Yeah. And like, I thought that was really interesting because I think there's too often, and I heard this comment and I didn't know, or this phrase, and I hadn't thought about it yet, but it's called a doorknob comment or a doorknob question. Like you're on your way out of the office or you're on your way out of somewhere and someone says something to like, it like basically opened up a huge can of worms and then they leave, like we're about to end the Zoom meeting and like, hey, by the way, blah, blah, blah. And then like, all right, we're done. Like there's no time to process. Yeah. I mean, how frustrating is that? And to acknowledge students' feelings and want to say like, hey, how are we going to summarize this? How are we going to end this well? And he has a really good, and I highlighted one of the instances in 161 and he talked about making sure there's enough time, complimented everyone on their focus and their choices in listening. So again, reinforcing some of those norms he established, some of those guidelines, express gratitude for their openness and their willingness to disagree without being too combative, right? And thinking about ideas over people, or thinking about, talking about ideas and not people, right? Reassured them that we would be spending the next few weeks exploring some of this. Hey, we're going to come back to it. And, we're not finished yet. There's loose threads happening. And to figure out what decisions, agreements, and action items. I really love that. Decisions, agreements, and action items. We've got something here. This conversation led to something. What decisions, agreements, or action items do we have off of this? And like, what a maybe satisfying or like, but to give kids something like that, like one of these things we're going to end this conversation with. Yeah, we're not done. We didn't solve the world's problems, but we've got something that we as a group have come up with. Like, I don't know. I thought that felt like gold to me. I don't know. What about you?
Well, absolutely. Because I mean, the rigor and the wealth of these conversations is so rich that you have so much going on. And you've been in a class where it was like, wow, you kind of need to sum it up at the end. Like, okay, these are the big takeaways. Because there's so much, and then you have people who are at different places in the spectrum. Some people are just at awareness, some people are at, I'm already an ally, and then some are already in action mode. So it's kind of like what I may be able to process as an intermediate may be different from somebody who's just starting out. Mm-hmm. So that summing it up at the end and recap is really important because I mean, if I'm still like, oh, wow, this was good, I want to make sure that I remember everything. And then especially kids are taking notes. And it's a good practice. I mean, if you write the way you talk, and I'm hoping that you're introducing things, giving the why, what, how, and summing it up at the end. So I think it's a good practice, a pedagogical practice, but it's also a good writing practice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And when you're speaking to students and teaching, you need to repeat yourself. There may be something somebody didn't hear or something they need to hear again, because sometimes when something's really good and really rich, you hear it more than once and you get more than one interpretation.
Right. Well, and that just, I mean, from there's those magic moments that happen in the classroom, and like he's captured a bunch of them. I mean, in here where there's like these conversations, and like the fact that he's got it's almost like another thing in his conversational package, right? Like, 10 minutes to go. We need to do this routine of, we're going to summarize, I'm going to acknowledge, I'm going to express gratitude. We have loose threads, but what decisions, agreements, or action items do we have going forward? Like thinking about it, if I got really rolling. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, excellent. I mean, and thinking like I do not end well classrooms. That is one thing so when I saw this, I'm like, there we go. That's what I need to, because too often I'll get so excited and in the moment, I'm like a squirrel looking around.
Gets away from you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Time gets away and all of a sudden it's like, we're going to do blah, blah, blah. And he's just not, and don't end well. And so like having these routines and thinking about, you know, the math lessons from the social injustice, if we get going on some topic and these are all messy problems where it's not just, oh, the answer's 3. No, it's like there's some big ideas happening, and to acknowledge, okay, we have this much time left. We've done lots of mathematics. We've addressed these issues and things like that. What do we know going out of this? You know, and to be thankful for all the interactions that's happening, acknowledge that we're not done yet. We did some good work together, but now what of our things going forward, and to engage in writing. Like, you know, some people might think, oh, a good writing thing, that's good for English classroom. It's good for math class. It's good for any classroom to process your thinking through writing, being able to express yourself, to actually say like what you did today, you know, like to being able to say that, you know, and like to think there's some real value there, and to what does it mean to your own view on how the world works. I mean, that was just, when I saw that, I was just like, and I mean, I've got several, I wrote so much there, but it's like, acknowledging that the time, like he did before, the math of, you know, how do I establish this ecosystem, to the math of, I need to invest time in making sure we end well, because otherwise their investment of time in like really engaging in conversation is like, well, we didn't come up with anything, right? We just kind of ended and it never led to anything, versus he's saying, we are going to end this well. And I really appreciated that. That was, I'm taking that one. Any other learnings that you had, Shimikqua?
So many. I can go on and on.
I know. Yeah. There's so much here.
It was so rich. And it's one of those that I'll read again and I'll pick up some things that I didn't notice the first time. But big ideas, this is important. This is exactly what we are supposed to be doing if we're trying to pull kids to higher level thinking and preparing critical, responsible, democratic citizens with integrity, and people who are able to analyze and defend deep thoughts.
Yeah.
I have to say this, in a time like this, how he really does a good job of emphasizing the importance of conflict. How it's important. Conflict and learning go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And how as educators, we need to learn to embrace that so that our students can. That was a big takeaway. He shows that in several different chapters.
Yeah. No, that's.
And just the importance of how many mindset shifts we actually need to have in our pedagogy to help move kids.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've been talking about, you know, with another doc student, with Candice Cook and with Dr. Monroe, is this idea of struggle, right? That struggle is a practice that we need in the math classroom. And it's like this idea of struggle or persevere, like, I mean, struggle is conflict too, right? I'm like, I got some conflict. It could be with a problem, could be within a group, could be whatever. Like, let's not go away from that, because yes, those are the places where learning happens. And we know that. I mean, we all know that from, you know, the best workouts. There were things that are tough to get through, right? If it was easy, then you weren't really stretching yourself. And so same thing goes for in the classroom. How do we create environments and safe places, right, where those conflict can happen? And again, he lays the groundwork. It's such good stuff. Yeah, I know this is like one of those things. It's like I think about my teaching toolbox, and I'm like, I'm like grabbing some things, and then all of a sudden, like I'm through halfway, and I'm like, I'm underlining more than I'm not, and it's like, okay, I just need to turn this box upside down and just dump the whole thing into my toolbox. It's good
and
stuff.
My quote box, so many amazing quotes in here.
Yeah, he's got definitely some good stuff. So we already mentioned that we both are doing the good news, that we've kind of taken something from his toolbox, put it in our own. What else? Anything else that either one you'd have done differently or you have done differently since reading this book?
So something that I definitely would have done differently, I wish I had heard of this. It seems so simple, but it's really I'm an acronym person. I really like the PRESS acronym.
Yes.
I'm like, wow, that would be so helpful. I definitely want to
talk more about that. What is PRESS?
PRESS, actually, he talks about on I believe it's on page 24.
Thank you.
Basically, the art of avoiding rambling. Now,
Yes.
kids do this quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
They ramble, and teaching them how to press is extremely helpful. But it's also helpful if you're teaching writing and summary. I mentioned that I taught fifth grade.
Yeah.
Oh my God, if I had press back then, it would take so much time. I know you're laughing because you got little ones.
Yeah. I got a sixth grader. Well, I need a teacher press.
When they're little and you ask them what happened or what's wrong, or they tell you something, they go all the way around. It's like, just get to the point, honey. What do you need?
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't find this and I couldn't. So you need a pencil. Just
Yeah.
say,
I don't have that. Yeah. Get to, so press, PRES, state your point, the main, which is your main idea, then your reason, your R, reason, why you think it's so, then an example, the evidence that backs you up, then offer a summary, restate your main idea. Give me the press. Don't
press forward.
That's right.
As a teacher, making sure you do it, and then helping your students. It saves time, and we think about time. It's so precious. You want to make sure that student's voice is heard, but we also have time for others to share.
Right.
And I feel like that press is good, definitely if you're trying to do a dialogic pedagogy, because what happens is when people ramble, sometimes we miss the point and it goes off into something else.
Yeah.
But also it takes up time from when we're trying to actually meet a goal. And then of course, press is phenomenal in writing. Oh my God, summary, that's a skill that's not going away. They make,
right.
And a lot of babies are still struggling with that. Press, main idea. What's the point? Okay, give examples. What is the reason? All this aligns with Common Core. This is going to get you to meeting all the objectives that your administrators and your district has for you anyway.
When you think about it, it's an equitable practice as well. When you think, specifically thinking about my situation, I think, are you teaching remote right now?
I am.
Okay. So teaching remote, once you hit Zoom to over, like you've got a defined amount of time and amount of bandwidth, like of who can be heard, right? So at one single time, only one person, if you're doing a full class thing, you can do more with breakout rooms, but like that, the value of time and who is being heard, and knowing that if I can encourage press, that we are being economical with our space so that more voices can be heard, more thoughts and ideas can be brought to the table, more conflict within our safe space that we've created can be done. Because if you can create the safest place that people feel really free to share and everything, but if people aren't pressing forward, then we're only hearing so many voices, and it's not good, right? We want to make sure we have spaces for those people that, for me, I was a slow processor. It took me a while to actually finally get my point and think about how I want to phrase it and stuff like that. And if all the space is gone, well, then what can you do? And so thinking about some of those folks out there who need that time, or, like, how do we make sure that time is available, and encouraging this? It's good. It's not just like, oh, it's good for, we got to teach kids to summarize. Well, there's a point for that, because how do we have good conversations if it's a monologue, right?
Absolutely. And, dealing with remote learning, I have discussion boards, and you'll have a kid who just writes a sentence. Well, if you teach them press, you're going to get a richer and more developed response in that discussion and in those posts. Right. And if they're responding with the press, giving them direction on how you want them to post to really, really enhance the quality of your posts and the dialogue. Yeah. Digital dialogue. I'm still, learning.
Oh yeah, we're all still working. We're
learning, but this is a tool that I'm like, oh, I can use this.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. Oh my goodness, that was because that's another one too. It's like, how do we provide structures to be intentional about how are you going to make your point? And he does it, and lots of intentionality here.
You got to work on your digital dialogue.
That's right.
Pedagogy.
Yeah. For me, it's, I think I've always valued building relationships. I've always, from the, my first year teaching, like we didn't do the syllabus first. We did things to establish, ourselves as a class and people that are going to work together. But I think intentionality too about, well, why? Like to what end? Not that we need to have, we should be good. We should build relationships no matter what. I think, let's build them, not tear them down. Let's not, let's be intentional about that. But even to think like, I want to be able to have these sorts of conversations. If I can build relationships where this is that ecosystem where we can have these kind of conversations, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good goal for building relationships. And you think about the relationships you have with people in your life as friends or family. Who do you have those relationships with that you can have good conversations with? And it's like, it's, and you can think about those folks. So you're like, you probably have a pretty good relationship with them. Right. And if we can develop that within a, like a public school classroom, like those sorts of relationships where we can have conflict, where we can talk about things that, tough conversations, these sort of race conversations that he presents within the class. If we can have those sorts of things, wow, what a beautiful space that would be, And so to have that intentionality behind building relationships, I thought was really good and kind of something I'm thinking about within my own classrooms. It's, again, I'm a work in progress, so we're continuing to learn. Anything else for any different? So we kind of hit that one. So we talked about differences. How about critique? Any loving critique?
So this was an awesome book. I wanted more.
Yeah.
I wanted more. So like a critique that I have is, I really wish he had put like contact information or how we can actually contact him for PD. He talks about how he does PD.
Yeah.
But you just have like the Stenhouse publisher, because I was trying to reach out to see if I could actually get him for some PD or Zoom or Skype. I'm like, I wish he would have provided his information, wasn't just the publishing company. But
he's on Twitter. We could reach out to him on Twitter.
Yes, like I'm trying to stalk him and find out how we can get him to talk at the university.
Yeah.
Also, he does a really good job. He brings up some really good points about the importance of collaboration and how most teachers haven't been trained on how to get kids to learn how to collaborate effectively.
Yeah.
I really wish he had provided more strategies on that, and even like a rubric on what that looks like. How do you know if your students are actually collaborating effectively? He just kind of touches on it, and then he gets into building those relationships, which of course help. You need good relationships if you want people to collaborate effectively. But what that looks like, because we know it's so important in our world, and I've never been on a job where I didn't have to collaborate with others.
Right.
So if we are preparing students to be college and career ready, we need to teach them how to collaborate with others. And I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of that right now just in our world, in America, with the coronavirus. Somebody said this is the group project. And the people who always do it are the ones wearing masks, and the ones who aren't are like other people are like we got to work together.
Right.
It's important that we really, really actually value collaboration. He talks about how the culture of schools is very individualized. It's valuing competition, and it's very individualistic, but we need to also teach our kids how to collaborate.
Right.
And I wish maybe that'll be his next book. That would be cool, but I think that would really, really be helpful, like some strategies and what that looks like, and even how to assess where your kids are in collaboration.
Yeah. I like the, similar to that is, the some of the exercises that he has at some of the end chapters is, aimed at teachers talking to teachers too, which is what I like about that. There's some like, consistency there, right? So if we're going to do this sort of work within our classrooms, we need to do it between classrooms or between teachers too. And like that there's some sort of consistency there that we're going to model. I like that. That's
Absolutely. Iron sharpens iron.
That's right. And so that's really good to see. But then for me, my own critique is like, it's actually more of a self-critique, is like how to fight against my own inertia. And it's like breaking out of what I've normally done, like for my classrooms, and thinking about how to Cause like there's this intentionality, there's things I can do, but still I'm thinking back to how I set up my classrooms, and it's like, there's still some patterns that I have, and it's like breaking out against them. And so my critique is more my own, than the actual book, because again, like I said, I dumped out the whole thing into my toolbox. And so trying to put these in, but then still incorporating it into like my own, purpose for what I'm doing. Right. So, one thing I talk about is leading people to love others through teaching. And so, that kind of changes. Well, what does it mean to love others? And there's some things in here, like what it means to love others is having these sorts of tough conversations in the classroom. Okay. So how do I create environments for that to happen? How do I make sure that how do I have the ecosystem set up? And so it's, and also too, my own positionality, right. And even thinking about who I'm teaching in the classroom, who's in the math methods classroom, who am I in position of them? And like, how do I, again, still have good conversations? There's a lot of like, not anxiety, but just like, do I have what it takes, sort of thing. Like, and I think he gives a lot of things here, but still there is something about taking a leap and making the decision to have these sorts of conversations. And so, and making sure that they're done in the right intentionality. And then that goes back into the personal catalyst versus the priorities, right? Or those propositions, right? Making sure it's in the right space. So that's good. So we did, all right. We're to the last one. The summon 7. I don't know if you had 7 words. I had less. I was really.
You were really concise.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if I was going to sum up this book to educators, I'd just say a defense and roadmap for dialogic pedagogy.
Bam. Nice.
A defense and roadmap for dialogic pedagogy.
Love it. That's great.
He tells you why and how.
Which is so satisfying, right? Like, because if you have one without the other, like one without the other, one way you're saying, well, why would I do this? The other way, like, well, how do I do this? And he gives you both. It's so satisfying. I said design safe spaces for tough conversations. Yep, that's 6. I got 6.
Yeah. You were real concise. You got 6.
Now yours, I like yours better. That was good.
Thank you.
So you're a very experienced teacher with all these sorts of different experiences, Shimikqua. Before we sign off, I would love to hear, what's the best thing you do in your teaching? This was a question I love to ask at conferences to teachers I would have interactions with, especially when I was a very inexperienced teacher. But like, what's the best thing you do in your teaching? What's some golden nugget you could share?
So if I had to say what I think is the best thing in my teaching, I would say reflection. I always tell my students an effective teacher is a reflective teacher. So I always keep a journal, but especially whenever I'm starting a new teaching experience, and now I'm dissertating, so I'm keeping a dissertation journal, but I constantly do post checks throughout the semester with my students. And I always get the best feedback from my students.
Did you say post check?
A pulse check.
Oh, a pulse check.
Like
check your pulse. Yeah. Gotcha.
I call them a pulse check.
Yeah.
So it could be an exit slip. It could be, give me a 3, 2, 1. It could be on an essay. Okay, I want you to evaluate your instructor. I want you to evaluate this lesson. What do you think went well? What could have went better? I learned so much, and I'm always checking the gauge to see how I can be better. And I have students who will tell you, and I have found that to be the most helpful, be it to, they need a little bit more time on that Kahoot, or I can't hear you, Miss,
right.
Really. And in order to remember that reflection, that real key that he talks about, listening. When he's talking about dialogic pedagogy, 2 of the main things: listen patiently, listen actively. Listen is twice.
Right.
There's no point in having these conversations if you weren't really listening.
Right.
So you need to listen to other perspectives so that you can be better. and
Absolutely.
take the time to process what you hear. And that's what I'm doing because I'm serious about being a lifelong learner and being a better teacher
Mm-hmm.
and meeting my students' needs and getting to know my students. So I'm constantly coming up with ways to try to learn from them. And so that's why I would say reflection is my best, because depending on what day, each day is different. You may have a lesson that you think is great. You've done it a
Right.
bunch of times, but this is a new group of kids. It's,
Right. Mm-hmm.
so you just want to constantly be reflecting on how you can be better.
That's really good. Yeah, I love the way that you said, just that you're being reflective, but then you're also talking to your students. Because I think for me, sometimes being reflective, like just thinking about myself and my own like versus like actually talking to the students, like getting their feedback. Because like sometimes you're beating yourself over something when that's the actual thing that they really. That was the good part of the lesson, like the thing that you thought, oh, I
Absolutely.
messed up on or something.
Something that you're so worried about. I'm like, no, I actually like that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, I'll do that again.
Right. It showed the human side of you or something. But then also to say, like, just because you have a good roadmap for this year does not necessarily mean when there's a new group of students in here that same roadmap is going to be what's best. Right. And so to be opening to that as well. Those are good. Those are excellent. Excellent.
And with me being in a position now where I'm a teacher educator,
Mm-hmm.
I need to model that for my students.
Yes.
I need them to know that it doesn't matter how many years I was in the classroom, education is constantly changing. And I need them to know that you never arrive.
Right.
You're always working on yourself. You're always trying to get better. And you're always listening to your students if you're going to be effective. And they need to see that I'm human.
Yeah.
And that I care. And that their experience is that it helps me be student-centered. I need them to see that I prioritize their input, their feelings, their growth. What do they find helpful? I'm trying to model that because I want them to be student-centered educators. It's not about me. It's about what did they gain from my class and how can I effectively help them get to the point that they need to get to.
Well, I know you're definitely leading teachers to be more reflective and to keep growing in their development as teachers, because again, you're modeling that for them, but you're also modeling it for us in this by establishing this book club this past summer and helping us talk about Not Light but Fire. So really thankful for that. And so Shimikqua, thank you for joining me on this episode of the podcast. And just I know I'm going to see you, but good luck with the rest of your dissertation. I know I'm going to be not just in the sidelines, but hopefully just get to play in the game a little bit and see what you get to do. And I'm excited for what's to come. But thank you again for joining us to talk about Not Light but Fire by Matthew Kay.
Thank you.
There it is. Great book, great conversation. So glad Shimikqua was willing to share some of her thoughts and ideas about the book, able to have that conversation. Still thinking about how to apply some of the things that Matthew R. Kay shared within the book, and just excited to engage in these conversations. Engage in this conversation about having conversations. And so now looking forward to put some of this stuff into action. So that is all I have for this episode of the Amazon Planet podcast. Show notes for this podcast can be found at amazonplanet.com/episode 32. And then also, if you're looking for ways to support the podcast, you can subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. That's always helpful. Subscribe to the Amazon Planet download. We talked about that at the beginning of the podcast, which contains teaching resources and updates for Amazon Planet. And you can also respond to any of those emails with ideas, suggestions, whatever you have that you think might be helpful for those figuring out how to teach better. Follow at Amazon Planet on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or like the Amazon Planet Facebook page. You can also check out the Amazon Planet store or Amazon Planet bookshop. Links in the footer at amazonplanet.com or in any of the show notes. You can also find the links there. Any of your purchases there support the production costs of the podcast. In conclusion, thank you for listening to this episode of the Amazon Planet podcast. Thanks to Shimikqua Ellis for sharing her expertise. Thanks to Matthew R. Kay for writing an awesome book, and for the University of Mississippi School of Education for sponsoring the book club this summer. And also thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. Again, if you want to, we had Matthew on a few episodes ago, but if you want to check out his music, go to Spotify, wherever you find music online, and you can search for his single Each Day, and he's got more music coming out in the very near future. Finally, thank you to all of you out there who are seeking to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you've been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.